Alright, so before we get into all of the project-based lessons, I just want to go over these settings just a little bit so that you're not intimidated by any of it and you can feel comfortable following the projects later in this course. So just to go over this a little bit, you can see that I have the Phoenix FD fire source selected, and I have the sphere here set as the emitter like we did in the very beginning. Now, the outgoing velocity, pretty self-explanatory. If I just run the simulation here at outgoing velocity 1, you can see what that looks like. And if I make that 10, you can see I'm getting a ton more fire being emitted out of this sphere. So I'm gonna make that 1 again. The other setting you'll end up using a lot is the noise, just to randomize the emission. So if I make this 5 and run the simulation, let's see what that looks like. So you can see that at noise 5, I'm getting these random plumes sort of popping out at random places. I can make it 10 to make it even more. It's a bit difficult to see in this specific example because this is just a simple fire going up. So especially in something like the explosion example, if the noise is set to 10, you're gonna get these random explosion plumes in random places rather than just getting a big uniform ball. So next up is the temperature, and temperature in this case basically controls how fast the fire will rise up. So this is a temperature of 2000, and if I make it 1000 and I continue with the simulation, you can see that basically due to the way the shader is set up, only temperatures that are high enough will get shaded as fire. So actually at temperature 1000, we're not really getting any visible fire. And if I make the temperature 2000 again, you can see that the hottest fire here is once again shaded. So this would be controlled by the volumetric rendering options, where we can control which temperatures of the fire show up and which don't. So we're gonna cover that later on. You can also completely turn on or turn off the smoke and control how much smoke is being emitted. So if I turn off the smoke and run the sim, now you can see that we're getting just the fire without any smoke. So this would be good for something like the candle simulation or anything like that. Now notice that the sphere is visible even though it's basically surrounded by fire. And that's because the GPU preview actually ignores geometry, right? So the geometry will always sort of appear in front of the fire. So it's a bit confusing, but just, don't get thrown off by that and just remember that the fire is in fact surrounding the entire sphere. So there's nothing wrong. Next up here is the fuel. So we could emit fuel and set that fuel on fire like I showed you in the presets. We have the RGB option here. So if, for example, I wanted half of the smoke coming from the sphere to be red and half of it be blue, I could just enable RGB and put a map in here, and it would give the smoke color based on the texture map. You can also emit some drag particles. So this is going to be the case in the cigarette example, where we actually are going to emit drag particles instead of smoke, and they're going to end up looking like cigarette smoke. So that's a neat little trick that we're going to do. New to Phoenix FD4, you have the inherit text UVW. So this is mainly good for liquid simulations where you need the liquid to have the texture go along with the liquid. So for example, if a candle is melting, you can have the texture melt sort of with the liquid. So this is pretty cool. And what I would also point out is the polygon ID. So if I select the sphere and I go make it an editable poly, and let's say I will select just these polygons in the middle, and I can set their ID to be 10. I can go back into the source and set the polygon ID to 10. And now if I run the simulation, you can see that the fire is being emitted only from polygons that we marked as number 10. So I use this all the time to define where the fire should be coming from. And this is also helpful for liquid simulations. If you took my liquid simulation course, we have done this a million times. So one more thing I want to show you for the source is the motion velocity. and this gives the simulation speed based on the object. So I'm actually gonna turn off temperature, and we're gonna emit only smoke. And I'm gonna select the sphere and set an auto key, make a key, and then maybe go, 20 frames forward and move the sphere over here, set a key. And I'm going to expand the grid here to cover the path of the sphere. So let's go under grid and Y and make sure that the whole thing is covered. So as you can see, the smoke is being affected by the sphere. It's basically given speed based on how fast the sphere is moving, and an interesting case here to showcase steps per frame. So the steps per frame are only set to 1, which is not enough. So we're getting these bands, which basically just means that Phoenix is not catching up with the speed of the sphere. So you would need to go under dynamics and set the steps per frame to 2 or higher. So let's run the sim again so you can see the difference. So now we're getting some much nicer interaction with the sphere. You can see that the whole simulation actually looks different now because the steps per frame have such drastic effect. You can see that the steppiness has disappeared, and also the smoke lasts longer, and we're getting some much nicer interaction with the sphere. And if I wanted to exaggerate this, I could go back under the source and set maybe the motion velocity to 2. So now all of the smoke will have twice the speed of the sphere, right? It'll be basically overcranked to emphasize the interaction with the sphere even more. So let's see what that'll do. And you can see that we're getting some much more dramatic plume, basically a much bigger plume of smoke than we were getting before. And actually the smoke is ahead of the sphere because, like I said, the smoke now has twice the speed of the sphere itself. So this is not necessarily realistic, but it can be cool for lots of abstract effects, maybe some Instagram loopable stuff, This motion velocity is something that I use all the time for something like a burnout effect, where you need the smoke to be spinning around the wheel. You could, set this to even something like 4, and it'll just give the smoke a lot of speed, make it look super cool. But generally speaking, I would leave this at 1. So just a basic overview of the source, so you're not scared of it. There's really nothing to be afraid of, some very basic settings here. We're gonna go over these a lot in this course, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson about the dynamic settings.